Today we have for this episode we have our first American speaker. Hello, Randy. How are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you, Mike?
I'm good. I'm good. So please tell us a little bit about yourself. For example, where you are from, where you're currently living, and how old you are.
Okay. Well, I'm getting up there. I'm turning 71, so I'll be 72 this year. And I have lived, I was born in South Carolina and have lived in Georgia most of my life, even though I did live overseas in France and India. And part of my younger years, my teenage years, were spent in Puerto Rico. And, so I think when we were just talking about accents and different ways of speaking and stuff,
Mhm.
so generally, like right now, is kind of the kind of speech that it's not too far off from a standard neutral American accent, but
Mhm.
there's probably a little bit of overlay of southern, southeastern. I live
Mhm.
in Atlanta, Georgia, and
Mhm.
I spend a lot of time in Tennessee as well. So most
Mhm.
of my life has been spent in the southeast, and there's a lot of different accents in the South
Mhm.
uh, that share some level of commonality,
Mhm.
but we were talking a minute ago about the whole notion of a register. I don't know if I'm going too quickly into
No,
that.
this is a normal interview. You just go at it, okay?
Yeah,
Just go
okay.
at it.
Well, shut me up if I talk too long because I often get accused of talking too much. And it's like once you start me talking, I could just keep going until somebody shuts me up.
Your southern standard accent is music to my ears, man.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. Well, so
Mhm.
there's kind. I want I studied linguistics in university like a
Mhm.
million years ago, and well, more like 50, but it seems like a million. And one of the things I thought would be interesting for your students is to understand the linguistic notion of register.
Sure.
And register is kind of the thing where, if you go to a news broadcast, like the guy that announces the weather or the
Mhm.
news on the TV, in any language, they're going to have a well enunciated
Mhm.
and more or less standard way of speaking
Mhm. Mhm.
without too much dialect or slang or any
Mhm.
that sort of stuff. I mean, obviously, if you listen to a radio announcer in Portugal, it's going to sound different than a radio announcer in Brazil,
Yes.
but they're going to have kind of an educated, well enunciated,
Mhm.
standard method of speech, right?
Sure.
It's not exactly, it sounds, it's more generic, it's more understandable
Mhm.
to a broad audience of people.
Mhm.
But then there's kind of like your street language or when you get down with your buddies or your families or
Mhm.
your local group, people are going to tend to fall into a more informal register, so to speak.
Sure.
So
Sure.
right up to now, I've been speaking with a pretty much a standard American English
Mhm.
register, which is kind of tends to be modeled off of the center, the Midwest, we call it,
Sure.
Ohio and Nebraska, those central states and stuff tend to
Mhm.
have that kind of register. When you go to the Northeast, to New York, to New England, they've
Mhm.
got some peculiarities on how their speech sounds. If you
Sure.
come down into the South, you really get some divergence from standard American register. Not so much in California. California tends to be pretty generic, standard
Yeah.
American,
Mhm.
but there are little idiosyncrasies, here and there. So,
Mhm.
you
Mhm.
know, um, so I don't know that's kind of the notion. And but if I was to get in, there's a few things about Southern speech that are interesting. So,
Sure.
um, like if I when I was a kid, okay,
Mhm.
and a lot of these accents have leveled over time. You do
Yeah.
not hear as strong of a dialect or regional strong accent in younger generations as
Mhm.
to when I was a kid in the 50s or
Mhm.
60s. Some of the old timers they would really have something that nobody talks quite like that anymore, you know. But
Hmm.
there still are pockets of people that have a pretty strong accent and stuff, you
Hmm.
know. So, you know, anyway.
Yeah, that is actually a really good question, right? I have, an answer for that as well, but I want to hear it from you. Why do you think accents tend to become more general over time, especially in the United States? For example, we watch TV show Friends, for
Yeah.
example, right? And that's very different from, for example, Barney Fife, like, 40 years beforehand. Why do accents become more general over time? And how does that reflect on, for example, media or, the younger generations?
Well, what I have come to understand is
Mhm.
that the, you know, in the 1950s, 70, 80, 90 years ago, people lived in much more isolated communities. Now you've got global
Mhm.
communication, you have radio, you've got TV, you've got internet.
Mhm.
So a typical person that's sitting watching Facebook videos or YouTube videos or watching the news or traveling is
Mhm.
exposed to a larger variety of accents. You know,
Mhm.
people in my grandfather's generation would have mostly developed their speech patterns from people that they could walk to their house or drive in a horse and buggy 100 years ago. You know, people in, I don't know, Georgia would probably never be exposed to people from New York or California 100 years ago. They would
Mhm.
be 99% of their time speaking to the neighbors that had their own speech patterns developed. So I
Mhm.
think mass media and then also education, you know,
Mhm.
state sponsored education. If you go to a public school, you know, the teacher may still have some level of accent, but it's going to be, you know, because of the education, they're going to be kind of brought up like a newscaster or, you know, a radio personality. He goes to speech, it's learns how to speak standard English so
Mhm.
everybody can understand him. It's kind of the same with a teacher. And if you look at the history in, let's say, France or Spain, you know,
Mhm.
they used to have a whole lot of dialects, you know,
Yeah.
Galician, Castilian, all these different dialects. But once there came a strong central government, they said, look, we're going to pick the dialect from Castile or the
Mhm.
dialect from I don't know, Portugal. You know, the capital. What's the capital of Portugal? It's
It's Lisboa.
Lisboa. So they
Yeah.
probably picked the Lisboa dialect and said,
Uh-huh.
look, if you're going to speak Portuguese, you got to sound like you're from Lisboa, you know. So it's
Mhm.
the same phenomena in a lot of countries. I think World War II was a
Mhm.
big leveler in the United States because
Mhm.
pretty much everybody of age joined the army and they were mixed up with people from many different backgrounds and
Mhm.
that kind of tended to make people talk, you know, more
Mhm.
similar, and they became less isolated based on their regional, you know, people that they talked with. So,
Makes sense. Makes
but
sense.
you know, I that's just my understanding. It doesn't mean I'm the last word on anything.
No, I think your explanation basically covers it, right? And of course, I mean, there are going to be exceptions. There is also, like, for example, strong pride in certain, not states, but like districts or regions of Spain, right? Where people are furiously like, this is my accent and I'm not going to change it, right? France, think tends to kind of to the opposite, right? Where the French insist on, Parisian being the central accent,
Mm-hmm.
in terms of media, and there's discrimination against groups that are like that. So those groups, they tend to try to create that sense of pride in their own accent as well. Right.
Yeah.
Whereas in the United States, I mean, there are groups of people, right? Like, for example, the Duck Dynasty people, right? The Robinson family, I think. And those Southerners who are really proud of the Louisiana Bayou accent, right?
Right.
There's of course, people from Boston with the Bostonian accent that hopefully I can find for this course as
Yeah,
well.
right.
Uh,
Well,
uh,
the thing that I think is that, in fact, I wrote my term paper when I
mhm.
graduated from college. It basically was this: that everything is yin and yang, right? It's like the
Yeah,
two
yeah.
polarities, and it's like centrifugal force and centripetal force are in a constant tension, and
Hmm.
it's true in language. So
It's
the
true.
centrifugal force that tends to bring people together
Hmm.
and speak more alike is like the forces of education, the forces of mass media,
Hmm.
the forces of stigma, because a lot of times, like you were saying, people that talk a kind of a distinct dialect or
Hmm.
strong accent can be looked down upon with a stigma
Yeah,
because it makes you sound like you're uneducated, like
it's
you're
true.
from the backwoods, right?
Hmm.
That
Hmm.
you talk like you've never been to school and you're ignorant or something. So people don't want to sound like they're
Yeah.
ignorant. But the counterpoint to that is that when people have pride in their culture, and
Yeah.
that includes their regional culture. So sometimes people will adopt that
Hmm.
as kind of a mark of pride. Hey, I'm proud that I'm from, the Bayou in Louisiana. So I'm kind of
Hmm.
going to emphasize that
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
difference and that accent. And I have friends, I know people
Hmm.
where within the same family, I know a friend of mine that has three sons, okay?
Hmm.
And one of the sons has essentially gone totally native. Like his parents and a lot of his peer group
Hmm.
speak more of a standard American English. But
Hmm.
this one fellow married a local girl and
Hmm.
identified very much with the local culture. So when you hear him talk, he doesn't talk anything like his brothers. He sounds like a local and has a really, really strong accent. And
Hmm.
my own kids, my daughter has a strong local accent. My son just talks more generic American English. So it's interesting, even with a family,
Hmm.
individuals may have a kind of an affinity
Yeah.
for, non-standard speech, and then other
Hmm.
people may be, wanting to fit in and speak the standard speech.
That is very true. That is very true. For the next part of the interview, I wanted to discuss a little bit. You said you have been in Georgia for 30 years, right?
Yeah, 30, 40. I mean,
30-ish.
part of that in Tennessee, Georgia,
Oh, okay.
right next
So
door.
yeah, so within those two southern states, and then you were from a different southern state, of course, which is
Yeah,
North Carolina, right?
South Carolina.
Sorry, South
We
Carolina, right?
and if you're from South Carolina, it's pronounced South Carolina.
South Carolina. It's true. It's true. Every state, right, has some specific way of saying their own state name.
Yeah,
Like
like
for
Georgia's Georgia, Georgia.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. California, people love calling it Cali, right?
Yeah, right, right.
North Cali, South Cali, Kentucky,
Yeah.
right? Is Kentucky, right? But so anyway, tell me about the differences in registers between these different southern states from your
Well,
opinion.
I don't know that I can say a whole lot about the difference between Georgia and South Carolina and
Sure.
Tennessee. There are subtle differences,
Hmm.
but a lot of those kind of again have been leveled,
Hmm.
and it's harder to put your finger on it. I'm sure some people that have studied that could have a different, you know
Hmm.
I can point out certain things that I heard in South Carolina that
Hmm.
are maybe a bit unique to South Carolina, but by and large, it's kind of the same
Hmm.
within the South writ large.
Hmm.
But one thing that's interesting about the register is the letter I. Okay,
Hmm. Okay.
and so when a standard American says I am going to the store,
Sure.
it's kind of like AI, like I.
Hmm.
But in very strong Southern accents, it's I.
Ah, yes. Ah,
So I
yeah.
am going to the store. I am going to the store. Or I'm going to the store.
Mm,
And
mm.
and like, you know, you want to fight? You want to fight? You
You want
know,
to?
you know, or I don't know. There's a lot of examples, you know.
Hmm.
So if you're from the South, you're gonna talk. You know, another thing about the South is that they do a lot of diphthongs. Okay, so
Yeah.
standard American would say, uh, "Don't talk to me like that."
Hmm.
Okay,
Hmm.
but you'll hear a lot of people in the South that will say talk. So it's almost like an AW, talk, talk. You know,
Linguistically speaking, would this be called vowel lengthening, where you're lengthening
it's
this?
more dip. I don't know what the term would be, but it's more turning Southern. A lot of the vowels in the
Hmm.
South have this falling
Okay.
diphthong.
Okay.
Like, of course, it's the reverse
Hmm.
with I and I. Like
Yeah.
I ain't gonna do that. I ain't gonna do that. You know, and ain't, of course, is a non-standard way of saying am not.
Yes. Yeah, the
And,
very sell students
mm-hmm.
to push to really push into that, I
Yeah,
think.
when I lived in India for a year, and
Really?
and the English from India,
Hmm.
the thing that got me the most was even the vocabulary. They said, okay, well, you're going to postpone the meeting, to be later, but then they said, oh, we're going to prepone the meeting. We're going to have it Tuesday instead of Wednesday. We're going to prepone the
Ah,
meeting. And I went, whoo, that's strange. I had never heard that. And that's unique to the English spoken in India. It's almost like its own dialect. They came up with prepone. I mean, nobody anywhere else is going to say, I'm going to prepone the
yeah,
meeting.
yeah,
It means you'll
yeah.
hold the meeting earlier.
But and that actually makes sense thinking about it.
No,
Like what's the opposite of
when I
postpone?
understood it, I
Yeah,
totally
yeah.
got what they were saying.
It's true. It's true. The hello cat.
Oh,
The
you got yourself a little black cat, a
little
cat.
nothing, man. Little nothing. Look at the size of this thing.
Oh man, that
Huge.
cat is something else. That cat is something else.
Yes, absolutely. I believe we are starting to run out of time, unfortunately, on the recording size. Uh,
Okay, well,
was there
hit
any
me back up any old time. I'll give you some more. Y'all come back now.
y'all
That's
come back
a
now?
standard
That's
thing.
right.
Y'all come back now.
Y'all come. That's something else. Y'all come back now. It's true.
Mm-hmm.
It's true. Thank you so much, Randy, for agreeing to this interview. You have given us so much to think about. I am going to have to rethink a little bit the organization of the course.
Yeah.
Thank
Much obliged. Much
much
obliged.
obliged. Okay. Okay, so for my students, I hope that you notice some of the peculiarities and the normalcies, right? Because for us, it's not really a peculiarity, it's a normalcy in our accents here. Um, for the homework, there are going to be a series of questions. Remember, this is the very first interview of the course. We are just jumping right on into the American accents, specifically the Southern accent, right? And for each video of the course, there is a worksheet. Be sure to fill out the worksheet for each video of the course. I won't remind you too much throughout the rest of it, but since this is the first one, I just wanted to, remind you guys, hey, we got a worksheet, and this is going to help you follow the content of the course as well. Okay, goodbye, Randy. Thank you so much. So Susie, thank you so much for agreeing to this interview. Please tell us a little bit about yourself.
I am originally from New York. I now live in North Carolina. My
Mhm.
family is from Guyana, South America. So they have British Creole, a little bit of the British Creole with them. And
Mhm.
um, that's my background.
Excellent. So, what made you move from New York to North Carolina?
I I'm a party girl. That's who I've always been. And so getting into trouble a lot, I moved
Mhm.
to North Carolina to live a slower paced life, one
Mhm.
where I didn't get into as much trouble.
Interesting. Interesting. So New York party culture, huh? That's
Mhm.
That's definitely something, a lot of my students would probably have questions about, because outside of the United States, foreigners tend to have this image, right, of what American party life is. Could you tell us a little bit about, like, what is partying in the United States and why is it so popular in the media?
So I think it's interesting because when a lot of people think of parties, what they think about is the Studio 54 and a
Mhm,
lot of that. That's what's always portrayed. But for me, because my family is immigrants, I'm first generation born in the US.
mhm,
For me, it was going to West Indian clubs, it was going to Caribbean clubs and Spanish clubs.
hmm,
So it wasn't a lot of the disco music, it was a lot of the old school, what's now old school dance hall, reggae, reggaeton,
mhm,
salsa, New York salsa specifically type of
mhm,
clubs. So still a lot of people, still a lot of dancing.
mhm.
In my opinion, personally, more fashionable by far. But and they were usually not in the city of Manhattan, but in the Bronx, Brooklyn, and Queens.
Mhm. Okay, makes sense, makes sense. Now, you mentioned New York salsa versus that is different from regular salsa.
New York salsa is a little bit it is a little bit differently, and I couldn't explain that to you, but I do, but there's also a genre of music of Puerto Rican house music that
Mm.
was very popular in the 90s. And so you can
Hmm.
still hear a little bit, like a lot of the beats you still hear, they get recycled, but also that was a very specific genre, which was kind of nice, not EDM at all.
Makes sense. EDM for our students is electronic dance music, right? Yeah, yeah. Okay. So you grew up in New York in the 90s.
Yes, I was born in 79
Mhm,
and I lived for the first 20 years of my life in New York. And
mhm.
so this last half of my life so far, I've been in North Carolina for 27 years.
Makes sense. What was it like growing up in New York City?
I would I wouldn't have had it any other way. For me, growing up in New York City, there was diversity like you won't find anywhere else. Whereas in North Carolina, there's very there's very specific pockets of people. In New York, one out of every eight people in New York were Indian. So I saw a lot of people that looked like me, that sounded like me, that acted like me, that knew a history or a culture behind me. And so in the South, it's not as diverse, or at least where I am, it's not as diverse. So when I first moved here 27 years ago, there was a lot of the, oh, wait a second. So you're Indian, but you're not from India. Oh, wait, you speak proper English. Like you're not,
Mhm,
but you speak Spanish. So I wasn't 27 years ago, North Carolina in Durham specifically, it was very black, white, Mexican. Now you have a little bit more of ethnic groups of cultures moving in, and it's nice, but I've never felt so many questions from that as I did when I first moved here. And then after 9/11 happened, I never felt so much racism as I felt after 9/11,
mhm,
being Indian in the South. Whereas in New York, the people there embraced the Indians because they knew that wasn't who did it. Like
mhm,
me personally wasn't who did it. It was we blame these people, whereas on the other side of it is we blame this culture, this ethnic group, these
mhm.
backgrounds.
Makes sense. Makes sense. I was, I think 6 years old. Yeah, yeah, 6 years old when 9/11 happened, right? But at that point, you were already, because you were in 1979.
I was already in North Carolina. I was 21.
Yeah, yeah. So, what was it like being an adult during 9/11 in the United States?
My 9/11 story is that I was getting cable installed, and the cable installer and I sat and watched as all of this unfolded. My aunt from Florida was visiting my parents in New York, and they were getting ready to leave to hop on the train to go to 9/11, to go to the World Trade Center so that she could see it for the first time. And
Hmm.
so and it's very different because I remember having like my first big girl date night at the restaurant on top of World Trade Center at One Trade. And so it for me it hit a little bit closer to home. Having also gone to high school in New York City, I lost out of 720 graduates in my high school class, I think we lost like 400 students. So we had a very big accounting in Dean Witter and the companies that were there. So for me, 9/11 just hit very, very close to home, being in the
Makes
South and
sense.
not being able to be there, being far enough away from it to see it as an outsider, but being part of it because of how I grew up and where I grew up.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Would you say that the country fundamentally changed after 9/11? Like maybe like the United States kind of felt different afterwards, right? And there were definitely, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
not just politically, right? But us as a
Mm-hmm.
people.
I felt we were more coagulated and we did better. I like to say this when you're dating people, and I know it's horrible, but I feel the same way about the country. We did what we needed to do for a little bit, and then we went back to who we actually really are. So we
Makes
pretended for a while, and it was nice. It was great. It was embracing, and then we went back to who we are. And now, I mean, when you look at it politically right now, there it's just a mess.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Of course, during this course, we're not going to get too much into politics, kids, or
Please, yes.
yes. So let's rewind a little bit back to your childhood in New York City, right? Can you give me a couple memories that you had growing up in New York?
Yeah. I grew up in a neighborhood that was predominantly Puerto Rican and Dominican in the Bronx. All of those accents out.
Hmm.
And so when you talk to her, as she's talking to her significant other, she's like, I need you to squish your mouth. So as you're talking to her, if you're not speaking properly, she will physically grab you and squish your mouth so that you can pronounce things correctly. So and I love it. I love every part of it.
Oh dear. Oh dear. And she does that with everybody. Like who
She has no shame. She's a little kid teacher, so in teaching them how to speak English, this is what she does. She just grabs their faces and pushes it together, or like she'll sit and explain how to hold your tongue, and you're like, I don't get it, but she understands it, and I love it.
can that fix pronunciation? I mean, as an online English teacher, I don't have the opportunity to
Yeah, to squish
squish
faces.
cheeks.
I will also admit that besides New York, in the South,
Mhm.
in North Carolina, my significant other likes to say Southern words, and he likes to say close the window, and I'm like, what's a window? And it's a window. Or he's fitting to go out, which means he's fixing to go out, which is also Southern, which means
Mhm.
he's getting ready. And so there's just some Southern slang that comes out, and I'm just kind of like, you said what now? So,
Even after
and
27 years.
even after 27 years, now I just make fun of it. But I have also recently realized, so at the age of 47, I have also recently realized that my immigrant parents never taught me is it called colloquialisms? Like they
I
never taught me little phrases. Like I never learned what cut the cheese meant until like the last 3 months ago.
Oh
Never
my
heard that.
God.
Never heard biting at the bit, chomping at the bits. Never heard of this. And that means when something's on a deadline, it's at the very end. It's a horse terminology that they're
Ah.
chomping on the bits. But never heard this before in my life.
I am from Kentucky. I feel like I should definitely know that since we are the horse capital of the United
Yeah,
States. But
yep, Kentucky Derby. But yeah,
yeah, yeah. For our students, by the way, cutting the cheese is a euphemism for farting. Just to throw that out there for the students who are watching. And honestly, I forgot this expression exists since I guess like that left my vocabulary after I was 13, right?
I bought a cheese cutter and I was like, I'm cutting the cheese. And everybody looked at me, but apparently it's a thing.
Perfect, perfect. Thank you so much, Susie. That
You
was
are
an
welcome.
excellent interview. Is there anything else you want to say to English learners before we leave?
No, good luck with it. English is not easy to learn. So you're doing great just by being here.
Excellent, excellent. Bye, everyone.